Welcome back to Crime Scene 24/7. To our returning subscribers, thank you for always engaging. Your likes, comments, and shares keeps us motivated. And if this is your first time here, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our chilling crime scenes. Here, we dig deep, we investigate hard, and we bring you stories the mainstream left unsaid. So encourage us by engaging in our videos. Subscribe if you haven't, like, comment, and share. On the morning of October 14, 2025, a small figure was carried into the emergency room at Medical City, McKinney. A 3-year-old boy named Dawson Zamora. He was barely conscious, suffering severe brain trauma, bleeding inside his skull, bruises in a dozen stages of healing, wounds to his chest, stomach, and what doctors described as anal trauma. When questioned about the incident, his mother's boyfriend, Christopher Thomas Alexander, told hospital staff he had simply heard a thud and discovered Dawson unresponsive. But the medical assessment told a starkly different story. One fall could not explain the extent and variety of injuries. The boy's mother, Rene Berg, age 30, had texted Alexander multiple times in the weeks leading up to the hospital admission. She wrote on September 9th, "He clearly hit his head when he fell. He has a bruise on his eyebrow and his whole jawline, our cheek is bruised. You're reckless. He has progressively been getting more and more hurt with you. Leave me alone. I'm not blind. You're dangerous." Then on September 18th, she texted again, 1,000% serious. "You bruise him, hurt him, and cause damage every single time you are with him. There hasn't been a single time you've been along with him where he hasn't been hurt." Despite these messages, on that October morning, Berg dropped Dawson off with Alexander around 7:20 a.m., went to work, and later received a call. Alexander was taking the child to the hospital. Within hours, law enforcement and child protection investigators converged on the hospital. Court documents and arrest affidavits show that Berg insisted the child had no such injuries when she left for work, but the bruising and trauma told a different tale. On October 16th, both Alexander and Berg were arrested. Alexander was charged with injury to a child, stalking, and tampering with evidence. His bond was set around $210,000. Berg faces a charge of injury to a child by omission, a first-degree felony in Texas, punishable by 5 years to life if convicted. Dawson lay in the hospital in a medically induced coma. Doctors told the father, Dawson Zamora, there was no detectable brain activity. Images of his bruised little body circulated, bruises of different ages, a helpless boy who had no voice but whose body told everything. And in the weeks before, his own mother had texted warnings. Yet Dawson remained in the care of the man she accused. The small Texas community now grapples with the question, how did the calls for help go unanswered? How did the mother's texts of September 9th and September 18th not trigger more scrutiny? How did a child so young end up in such dire condition? In the weeks ahead, investigators will go through phone records, school records, hospital visits, and any hint of prior injury. Documents show that Alexander had an active ankle monitor and past charges of stalking. Yet Dawson was still under his care. Meanwhile, attorneys for Berg are already seeking supervised access, citing her desire to say goodbye to Dawson before his life support is withdrawn. In these few minutes of the human heart, what you're about to hear is not just the timeline of one boy's suffering. It's the echoes of missed alarms, the tremors of trust broken, and the shattering of innocence. Because when a 3-year-old's survival hangs by a fragile thread, time no longer feels long enough, and love alone is not always enough to protect. In the days following the initial discovery, law enforcement and medical examiners began piecing together a chilling chronology around 3-year-old Dawson Zamora. On October 14, 2025, he was rushed into the hospital in the morning after being found unresponsive by Christopher Thomas Alexander, the boyfriend of his mother, Rene Berg, who claimed he heard a thud and discovered Dawson in critical condition. But hospital staff quickly flagged the level and variety of injuries as inconsistent with a single accidental fall. Among the findings, severe brain trauma, internal bleeding in the skull, bruises across the body at different stages of healing, wounds to the chest and stomach, and evidence of anal trauma. Dawson's father, Dawson Zamora, described the moment he learned of his son's condition as surreal and devastating. He said there had been no improvement in his son's prognosis. Global brain damage, still on life support. Investigators then turned to messages between Berg and Alexander. On September 9th, Berg texted Alexander, "He clearly hit his head when he fell. Bruised. You're reckless." And on September 18th, 100,000% serious. "You bruise him. There hasn't been a single time you've been alone with him where he hasn't been hurt." These messages, along with medical scans showing prior bruising inconsistent with the healing process of one incident, raised the suspicion of multiple episodes of abuse. On October 16th, both Alexander and Berg were arrested by the Collin County Sheriff's Office. Alexander was charged with injury to a child, stalking, and tampering with evidence. Berg was charged with injury to a child by omission, meaning she allegedly failed to act while aware of the danger to her child. Meanwhile, Dawson remained in the intensive care unit, his condition grave, his father by his bedside, and the community asking how such extensive injuries could go unnoticed, how warnings had been sent and yet the child remained vulnerable. As this case moves toward trial, the legal system must determine whether Alexander will be held fully responsible for the devastating injuries and whether Berg's knowledge, via those text messages, will translate into the severe punishment the law allows for omission. Investigators combed through cell phone data and text threads and uncovered that on September 9, 2025, his mother, Chelsea Rene Berg, sent a message accusing her boyfriend, Christopher Thomas Alexander, of injuring Dawson. "He clearly hit his head when he fell, bruise on his eyebrow and his whole jawline cheek is bruised," she wrote. On September 18th, she wrote again, 100,000% serious. "You bruise him, hurt him, and cause damage every single time you are along with him. There hasn't been a single time you've been along with him where he hasn't been hurt." These messages triggered investigators to review medical scans and hospital records showing injuries at various stages of healing, inconsistent with a single incident. As detectives delved into Alexander's background, they found previous convictions for theft and unlawful restraint, and a recent stalking indictment. The presence of an ankle monitor was cited by the father, Dawson Zamora, who said his son had been placed under Alexander's care despite these red flags. Meanwhile, Dawson remained in a medically induced coma in the hospital, and his father said there was no improvement. The MRI and CT scans revealed global brain damage. The pressure mounted on Chelsea Berg. Court documents state she insisted her son had no injuries when she left him with Alexander on October 14, 2025, around 7:20 a.m. But medical staff reported the injuries included brain bleeding, multiple bruises in different healing stages, wounds to his chest and stomach, and anal trauma. On October 19th, authorities reported that Dawson had no detectable brain activity, and his father's attorneys filed motions to modify her bond condition so that she might say goodbye to her child. In the days that followed, investigators from the Sheriff's Office, Child Protective Services, and hospital forensics met to compile the chain of custody on the phone records, analyze the nature of the injuries, and trace any previous visits or hospitalizations for Dawson. The looming question: how many times had this boy been harmed before, and how many alarms had been unanswered? As the legal wheels begin to turn, the charges against Alexander carry the weight of injury to a child, tampering with evidence, and stalking. For Berg, the charge is injury to a child by omission, a category that in Texas can bring a sentence ranging from 5 years to life behind bars if convicted. As the investigation continues, the focus has shifted to courtroom strategy and the fate of a boy whose life now hangs by threads. On October 27, 2025, newly released warrant documents revealed that Chelsea Rene Berg, aged 30, had repeatedly texted her boyfriend Christopher Thomas Alexander, also aged 30, more than a month before Dawson Zamora was hospitalized, accusing him of hurting her son and describing bruises with specific mentions of his jawline and genitals, messages that underscored her awareness of prior harm. Court filings indicate that Berg's bond was set at $100,000, and one of the conditions imposed forbids her from having any contact with Dawson or coming within 500 yards of him or his siblings. Alexander, meanwhile, is being held in the Collin County Sheriff's Office jail on a combined charge list that includes injury to a child, stalking, and tampering with or fabricating evidence, his bond combining to around $210,000. From the hospital's intensive care unit, Dawson's biological father, Dawson Zamora, has spoken publicly of his son's condition. The MRI and CT scans revealed global brain damage and previous injuries inconsistent with the healing process, leading him to say he was already dead when he got to the lobby of the hospital. Legal experts following the case note that Berg's charge, injury to a child by omission, is a first-degree felony in Texas, carrying the possibility of 5 years to life in prison if she's convicted. Meanwhile, prosecutors are preparing for trial. They intend to present not just the October 14th incident, but a pattern of alleged abuse highlighted by those prior bruises and texts. Defense attorneys are expected to challenge the hospital timing, chain of custody of evidence, and Berg's motivations. The important next step is the upcoming pre-trial hearing, where bond conditions may be revisited and the timeline of injuries will be scrutinized. As the community watches, the question echoes: will justice be served for 3-year-old Dawson? And how will the system respond to a case where the warning signs were so plentiful and yet so tragically ignored? As we draw this chapter to a close, let us reflect on the weight of what has unfolded for 3-year-old Dawson Zamora and all who walk this path with him. In the quiet halls of the hospital, with monitors beeping and machines keeping a small body tethered to life, his father, Dawson Zamora, holds vigil. He has said there has been no improvement in Dawson's condition, citing global brain damage and a past of injuries inconsistent with one incident alone. The legal proceedings loom large. His mother, Chelsea Rene Berg, faces a first-degree felony charge of injury to a child by omission, a possible prison sentence stretching from 5 years to life. The mother's boyfriend, Christopher Thomas Alexander, stands accused of injury to a child, tampering with evidence, and stalking. Their defenses are mounting. The prosecution prepares to present what appears to be a pattern of abuse, and the court must weigh not only what happened on October 14, 2025, but the weeks, messages, bruises, and doubts that preceded it. Beyond courtrooms and indictment papers, there lies a deeper question. How did a little boy, old enough only to toddle and speak a few words, end up here? How many chances were lost? How many inquiries were ignored? And what will become of Dawson, if he survives, after the cameras fade, after the headlines move on? For those of us bearing witness, there is a responsibility to remember his name, to follow the case, to ask for updates, to demand that the system hold those accountable. Because this is more than a tragic story. It is a call to action. If you have followed Dawson's journey this far, I invite you to go further. Here is Crime Scene 24/7. Subscribe, ring the bell, share the story with friends, family, communities where children might yet be unseen, unheard, vulnerable. If you see something, say something. If you know of children at risk, reach out. Help raise your voice so that this boy's suffering does not vanish into silence, so that names like Chelsea Berg and Christopher Alexander face justice, and so that Dawson does not become just another statistic. We will continue tracking the courtroom updates, the condition of Dawson Zamora, the outcome for the accused, and any changes in policy or preventive action that emerge. Stay with us, because stories like this don't conclude with case closed. They conclude when society refuses to forget. Thank you for being here. Subscribe, share, engage. Because his fight and our fight is still very much alive.